It's our last day to walk around on the battlefield where spiritual warfare was waged with unequaled ferocity and intensity. Our interest in walking around and trying to learn what we can from the battlefield where spiritual warfare was waged between Jesus and Satan is not just to be able to learn some interesting things. It's because there is some disturbing news. And it's this. Our interest is driven by the fact that Satan targets us as well. And we have an opportunity to go to school and learn about strategy and tactics from Jesus' example. So that's why it makes sense that we would think about this. We have an opportunity to learn to defend ourselves in spiritual warfare. And as we looked at this, we looked at the combatants, Jesus versus Satan, and we've got to understand, okay, how does that apply to me? I'm not Jesus. And so we'll look at that. We saw that it's a battle in 3 rounds. In terms of spiritual warfare, round 1 was satisfy the need. I'll read. It says, Jesus was led by the Spirit into the desert to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. The tempter came to him and said, if you're the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread. Jesus answered, it is written, man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. What we saw is that the first temptation dealt with the physical need for food. And what the point seems to be, use your connection with God to get Him to provide for you. Sure, He said that He's with you, but apparently He must have forgot to bring dinner. Use your connection with God to get Him to feed you. Now, that was round 1. Round 2, I think, was about silence the anxiety created by the need. What we read is that the devil took Jesus to the holy city, had him stand on the highest point of the temple. Said, if you're the Son of God, he said, throw yourself down. For it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. Jesus answered him, it is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test. If the first one was about a physical need for food, this isn't about a physical need, but it is about an emotional one. And what it seems to be, use your connection with God to get Him to protect you, or to get Him to prove that He will protect you. Silence the anxiety created by the need. Read somewhere that there's a difference between fear and shame. Fear is the response to facing a threat. Now, the threat could be real or imagined. It really doesn't matter. When we feel like ourselves or someone close to us is in jeopardy, a natural, normal response is to become afraid. If you threaten me, it's not wrong for me to feel fear. Fear is a natural response when we face a threat. Fear allows us and moves us to take decisive action in one of 2 directions. If I believe that I can successfully defend myself, I'll fight with you. And fear readies me to do that. If I feel like I cannot do that, I will flee from you. But either way, whether it's fight or flight, fear motivates me, puts energy into my legs and into those parts of me so that I can act decisively. Anxiety is the response to facing it alone. If fear is the response to facing a threat, anxiety is the response to facing it alone. And that's not a good thing. All of us want to believe that when we get in trouble, that we have someone to call out to for support and protection. Now, some of us aren't as aware of our desires because we like to believe that we don't need anyone. But deep down, if you search at the core of each one of us, we really do desire that there would be somebody there to support and protect us in a time of need. And when we don't believe that there is, it creates a sense of anxiety when we face a threatening situation. Unmet needs awaken anxiety. At some level, the fear of having a need is joined by the fact that we face the threat alone. And that's what happens when the physical need becomes an emotional need. If I have a physical need for long enough, what's going to happen is that it is going to evolve from one problem into another problem. And like, say, food, for instance. If I'm an infant and I depend on you, if you're my parent, to feed me, and if my cries go unheeded, that need for food will become another need. I will begin not only to feel afraid because of the hunger, I will begin to feel anxious because I'm alone. And that, maybe we could put it this way: the stomach ache will trigger or breed heartache. And heartache is not something that food can deal with. And we talked about if an infant's been left in a crib too long, and if you as a mother or father go to feed the infant, and if you take a bottle and try to plug that bottle into that frightened child's mouth, will that child feed? No, it will not. Why? Because that's not the need now. The need now, fear has become anxiety, and they need to be held and supported and loved and whispered to. Once that happens, then you can take the bottle. But that's what happens. Silence. And with Jesus, it seems that the temptation is directed at the anxiety created by hunger. And again, I think it's Jesus was God. There's a surprise. But he also dealt with mortal needs, right? Like us. When hunger was communicating to him, he was tempted to believe the same things that we believe. And I think this is what it might have looked like. Are you sure that you aren't alone? Geez, 39 days is a long day to not have a meal. God said that he would never leave or forsake you. That's interesting. When somebody provides for you, they usually give you food, don't they? You have the right to make him prove it. I think that's what this is about. You have the right to make him prove it. You are the Son of God, for crying out loud. You have the right to live by sight. And I think that's what the second temptation is. Silence the anxiety created by the need. You don't really know he's with you. Throw yourself down from someplace. See if he catches you. Right? That'll show it. That'll prove it. And what Jesus did for each of these, he gave an "it is written." And then we need to figure that out. But the final thing, spiritual warfare round 1, was satisfy the need. Number 2, silence the anxiety created by the need. And 3, submerge the shame and fear that were created by the anxiety. Submerge them. When we feel anxious, we feel at some level ashamed and afraid. And I'll explain that. But shame and fear are very difficult to tolerate. They make us feel terrible. And we don't want to stay in those emotions for long. So what we do is we try to find a way to submerge those feelings. And so we try to submerge them under a lot of different things. Become workaholics, sexaholics, alcoholics. We do a lot of things because if we keep on doing these things, it causes us not to feel the shame and the fear that were created by the fact that we have unmet needs. And those are awful feelings to feel. In fact, we'd rather be angry with ourselves and say, "You're an idiot." I'd rather call myself an idiot than deal with the shame and fear that I might not be loved. Or I'd rather call you an idiot. And I'd rather live my life being angry at you than I would to have to admit the fact, I'm not sure that there's people that care for me enough to give me what I need. And I'm not the only one that does this. We all do this. What happened in the third temptation, it's at the top of the page in terms of the handout. The devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in their splendor. "All this I will give you," he said, "if you will bow down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." What this is about, again, is submerge the shame and fear created by the anxiety. The third temptation dealt with the evidence of influence. The evidence of influence. You know what's bad about having unmet needs? It's the evidence of the absence of influence. If I have a bunch of unmet needs, you know what that means? I couldn't get you to give me what I need. I couldn't influence you to do that. And it means that I couldn't influence myself to not want them, so I get stuck. And that's what the evidence of the absence of influence is, a very difficult thing. It triggers shame and fear. And so what Satan offers Jesus is, well, Satan gives Jesus the opportunity to be globally influential immediately. When it says the kingdoms of the world and their splendor, the word for splendor is the word for glory. And glory is regard or valuation. I'm going to say that again. I've said that before. There's some concepts that the more I think about them, the more helpful they are. Glory is one of them. You know, when we think of glory, we think of God's glory shining, and its glory kind of goes, you know, and it's just kind of this thing. It's kind of light, and when you see glory, you have to go, holy smokes, give me my sunglasses. And what glory really is, it's valuation. It's regard. If you come into a room and I value you, glory is the smile on my face that I get when I see you instantaneously know. And it's not this ooze or this light. What it is when I am reflecting my glory on you, you feel regarded and loved. So glory is regard and valuation. And I think part of what's here is when Satan gives Jesus the glory of the world, what he's giving him is global influence. I don't think it's about being filthy rich. I think it's about being instantly influential. And what Satan is offering him, at this point, Jesus is not well known. Satan says, I'll tell you what, you didn't get food, you don't know if you're protected, I know what you'll need. What if everyone in the world goes, you're the man? You're the man. And you know what Jesus is going to do? He's not going to use that influence to beat people up. He's going to drive them to the Father. But, you know, we understand that that's not quite his plan, is it? He doesn't want us to be regarded by the Father for 40 or 50 years, or 80 or 90 years, depending on how long you have to live. He wants us to be regarded by the Father for 800 years, 8,000 years, 758 billion years. Is it 758? Anyways, okay. For Jesus, it means turning the world to the Father. He'll do that. And again, I think we have to ask, why is this tempting? What's the attraction of power and influence? Like I said, unmet needs evidence the absence of influence. I mean, that's a lot of enses. You know, if you know me, I like things to sound the same, everything to begin with the same letter. Mark blew me up last week. That's fine. We like to begin everything with the same letter. Mark's the same way. There, I got you back. Unmet needs call into question that our influence is accepted by those who care about us. I want you to try to dial into that. At some level, you might be aware of it or not. But if you have a bunch of unmet needs, at some level, what you're asking, some of you ask it out loud, some of you don't. If you cared about me, wouldn't you give me what I want? I mean, that's not unrealistic, is it? If you cared about me, why do you keep on saying things to hurt me? Why don't you give me what I need? Unmet needs evidence the absence of influence. And what we end up saying then is, I'm not really important to you. And that makes us feel ashamed because we're unloved, and afraid because we're exposed. Now, we don't like that, so what we do is we'd rather feel angry. I'm an idiot. That's why I don't have my needs met. We'd rather get angry with ourselves, or get angry, you're an idiot, than deal with what we really deep down feel inside. I don't know if I'm loved. Do you know that's your issue? Are you aware of that? That that's a question deep down that you're wondering? And it's not because you're bad, it's because you're human. And you've unmet needs. I deal with the same thing. Are we really cared for? Why do we have so many unmet needs? Unmet needs evidence the absence of influence, and unmet needs trigger shame and fear. Shame because we're not provided for. We're not loved. We're unloved. That's what shame is about. It's about, I should be being loved, but I'm not. That's not a good feeling. I feel ashamed. I feel defective. Fear, because we're unprotected. We're alone. If you're an infant and you're not confident that you're going to be responded to, you're in a lot of trouble. Because infants are very vulnerable. And we grow up in some way, but in other ways we don't grow up. We deal with the same feelings ever since we're little. And the feeling that we are unloved and exposed triggers very difficult feelings to feel. And glory evidences the presence of influence. That's what glory is. It's regard, evaluation. And at some point we feel ashamed and afraid, and we want some way to believe that we matter. And glory, what that does is when I smile at you, and smiles are fine. Smiles make us feel, oh, well, I must matter to someone because he smiled at me. And that's not a bad thing. I guess to receive glory is to be regarded, praised, and affirmed. We bask in glory because it provides visible evidence that we matter to somebody, that our influence is accepted. Remember Sally Field at the Oscars? When she accepted a long time ago, you like me. You really like me. What's that about? Having received an award. We understand that. It's the evidence of influence. I matter. I did something good. And you could see it in her face. She said it out loud. Some of us would never do that. Some of us are more honest, some of us aren't. And we'd go, it's nothing, but we'd like to catch that look again. And we'd like to take a picture of somebody who praises us and hang it up on a wall. Why? You know why you want to be praised? It's a normal human thing to want to be provided for, protected, and praised. These are the building blocks of human personality. And that's why we have to figure out, so what are we supposed to do? Go without food? When Satan tempts us, are we supposed to not eat? Or am I supposed to just do whatever and don't care if I'm protected? Am I supposed to not be praised? No, that's not the point. But what we know, glory reduces shame and fear. Human glory does so temporarily. And you know the way that works. If you smile at me, my shame and fear dissipate. You get that, right? We get that. You know what happens, though? The next time, you have to smile at me bigger to make shame and fear not go down quite so far. You know, shame and fear are like a beach ball. You ever try to keep a beach ball under the water? It's difficult, isn't it? It wants to pop up. That's what shame and fear are like. And what we do is we recruit people's smiles, affirmation. Why? To keep this beach ball under the water. As long as you're smiling at me, I feel worthwhile. I feel less ashamed, less afraid. This is just human stuff. I'm not going to point a big bony finger and say, bad. This is what we deal with. And so all we're doing is try to figure out when we're tempted to satisfy the need, silence the need, or submerge the need, what should we do? In fact, we possess and parade. We talked about that as human. You know what we want to do? If I see something I want, see if you get this. I see something I want. What do I want? I have nothing good up here. I want this thing. I have it, but I want it. I got this thing. I want to possess it. Say it's over here. Okay, I'd really love to have that thing. So I get this thing. I possess it. Now what am I going to do? Parade it. Look what I got. Why am I parading this? You get this? Why am I parading this? Because some of you want this, and you know what you're going to do? You're going to go, wow. And you know what that's going to make me feel? I must be pretty important. I must be something. And this something, the look I get from you, keeps my beach ball under the water for 15 minutes. But then I need to get a better clicker. You understand how that works. In fact, we need a better clicker, although this is working. I really didn't need to say that, did I? What's the temptation? with power and influence. It seems to be that human glory, regard, I would equate those two words. Glory is regard, right? Glory is, I value you. That's what glory is. And when it comes from God, it's having the sense that God values and regards you. Human glory or regard interferes with experiencing divine glory. Now, God regards us. But human glory, when we live for human glory, it doesn't turn God's regard on or off because God regards you. The thing that happens, human regard interferes with divine regard in terms of being able to experience it. Look what it says in the sheet. Jesus said, I do not accept praise from men. What that means is Jesus didn't live for people's smiles. He didn't grab those smiles and say, you're smiling at me, I must be something. It didn't mean that Jesus said, oh, no, it's nothing. It's not that he was falsely humble, but he didn't base his sense of security on whether people were smiling at him or not. He didn't accept praise from men and eat it as his food. He says, I don't accept praise from men. He goes on, how can you believe if you accept praise from one another, yet make no effort to obtain the praise that comes from the only God? What it seems to be saying, if our whole life revolves around doing things to get people to smile and not to get them to frown, we can accomplish that. The thing that we sacrifice is what? Experiencing divine regard. If my life revolves around that, that will lead me down a road where I will do things that God would have me not do that will lead me away from experiencing Him. And we could talk about a bunch of stuff. If you feel unloved, you can have an affair. And having an affair will make you feel loved for a short amount of time. But when you walk down that road, what you end up doing is you end up not experiencing divine regard, which goes on and on and on. There's another verse. Look at the next one. At the same time, many, even among the leaders, believed in Jesus. But because of the Pharisees, they would not confess their faith for fear that they would be put out of the synagogue. For they loved praise from men more than praise from God. The word praise here, it's the same word for splendor or glory. All the same word. And they just translated it, glory or praise or splendor. But what it's saying, if you work for the glory, the praise of people, not only will it keep you from experiencing divine regard, it will become the reason for not following Jesus into human disregard. Because what Jesus said, if you follow Him, there will come periods where people will go, you'll get what you don't want. You'll get people going, and what happens if you seek praise from people, what Jesus is indicating here, and I don't like this. I don't like people not liking me or being happy with me. You know, some of us are like that. But what Jesus indicated, that's going to happen. And if you're seeking and living for human regard, and if I walk down a road that God wants me to walk down, and you're on that road going, well, Jesus is saying that you won't walk down that road. That's a human regard can interfere with divine experiencing, divine regard. Let's look at Jesus' resistance, what He did. When you back way up, and I want us to get a pretty good idea of what's happening in the wilderness. I think here's ultimately what's going on here. Satan is saying, use divine connection to end the discomfort. I think that's what it is. Satisfy the need, silence the anxiety created by the need, submerge the shame and fear created by the anxiety. But at any one of those three levels, what will end up happening is the discomfort will go away temporarily. End the discomfort. End the discomfort. Get away from it. And that's what Satan is saying. You deserve it. You're entitled to it. And what is Jesus saying? Use divine connection to endure the discomfort, not to end it. I'll tell you what, this isn't great news. If you follow Jesus, what Jesus is going to strengthen you to do is not to eliminate your discomfort, but to endure it. He's not invested in this being bliss because it's not bliss, is it? This isn't the Garden of Eden. This isn't heaven. We don't get what we want here. And what Jesus will do, He will strengthen us to endure discomfort. I really get tired of hearing biblical preachers say that if you follow God, you'll get whatever you want. That's not true. I don't know what Bible they're reading. It's just not what it says. Now, will He meet your needs? Yeah. Will He walk with you? Yeah. But it's not going to be heaven on earth because this isn't heaven. Look what it says in Hebrews 12, 2 and 3. And again, there is an upside here. But it seems like let's face the real news. Let's not create a fantasy that if I pray enough and read enough, that all my life will fall in line and my life will look like this well-ordered, happy little thing. I don't see it. I don't see it. Look what it says. These people in Hebrews 11, it's like the hall of faith, and it describes all these people that walked with God, and their faith was very strong. Look what it says in the first line of this. In fact, would you just read that to yourself? Look at the first line of Hebrews chapter, I think it's Hebrews 11, actually 39. Read that first line. Did these people have faith? Did they receive what had been promised? Wait. Are you shaking your head? No. But they had faith, right? Right? And when you have faith, you receive what's promised, right? So you must have misread it. Okay? Yeah, you must have misread it. Because it says they were all commended for their faith, and all of them received what had been promised. Maybe there's a mistake in the Bible. No, there isn't. They walked by faith, yet none of them received what had been promised. It goes on. God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. You know what happens? Some of us go through difficult things so our kids' life can be better, so that their kids' life can be better. And what it's saying here, people went through difficult things so that their work contributes to where we are, and that our work contributes to where somebody else is. Guess what? God does not evaluate life relative to 50 years. When He plans, He's thinking decades, millennia down the road. Our thoughts are confined to now. And we're happy or not based on what's happening now. And that's why Jesus said, end the discomfort now. And Jesus said, no. I'm going to endure the discomfort now so that others can be comforted eternally. Because in God's mind, that's what's good. I've said this before. In God's estimation, when the temporary suffering of one contributes to the eternal welfare of many, God calls that good. That's why we call that Friday Good Friday. It goes on, says, God planned something better. Therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before Him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider Him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. None of them received what had been promised. And it says, consider Him who endured, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Jesus suffered in order to model endurance. We will walk through fearful circumstances. And what Jesus wants you to understand, if you follow Him, you will walk through difficult circumstances. He wants you to know you will not walk through it alone. There will be opportunities where you will be afraid. What God would want is for you not to be anxious. Do you remember the difference between fear and anxiety? Do you remember it? Fear is facing a threat. Anxiety is facing it alone. You're not alone. You are not alone. You are not alone. You're not alone. And neither are you, and neither are you. Why? God said, I will never leave you. I will never let go of your rope. I will never forsake you. I will never leave you behind. You're not alone. And that doesn't mean that you don't feel fear. It does mean that it can reduce your anxiety. Jesus' resistance, he trusted the Father's commitments. Jesus trusted his Father. The thing that made Jesus Jesus is that he knew the Father. People were telling him, well, you got to be careful because if you step out of line. And Jesus said, you don't know the Father. They say, oh, yeah, yes, we do. If you do, then don't do. And Jesus said, excuse me, you don't know the Father. I know the Father. I know what he's like. I know that he'll never leave me or forsake me. And so Jesus had a leg up on us. The Spirit that indwelt him drove that deep. And that's what made Jesus God. He knew the Father. And Jesus kept the Father's commandments. 3 times, it is written, led to no. It is written, no, I won't do that. It is written, no, I won't do that. It is written, no, I won't do that. He kept the commandments. See Braveheart? Any, those movies like any of Troy or Braveheart, when these armies go into battle? And, then there's the infantry like Braveheart. It was the Scottish. And they were going into battle, and then the English had, and the Scottish had swords, and the English had swords. But what else did they have? Arrows. Tell you what, and so what the English would do when the Scottish were charging, they would stand back. Archers forward, they'd raise the archer banner, and then the archers would pull back and just rain arrows into, because you know what? If you're getting hit with arrows, can you use a sword? So you have swords, and I have a zillion arrows, and you're going to come at me with swords. You know what? You're never going to get here. And I think faith is the shield that helps us deal with the arrows. The sword is doing what God wants. If you don't figure out how to use the shield, you're not going to use the sword. You're going to get to a point where you're going to be told, do this, and you're going to look for a no, and there will be no no available. Maybe it'll be in a bedroom. Maybe it'll be filling out a tax form. And there will come the thing, do this, and you'll look for a no, there won't be anything there. You know why? You didn't use your shield. And unmet needs caused us to believe, he's not here anyways. What the? He abandoned me anyways. Do you understand what happened? Unmet needs cause you to feel inside that, well, he's abandoned me anyways. In order to be effective with the sword and to have a no, we've got to deal with the arrows. And that's something that doesn't happen in the bedroom. It happens during the workday. It happens at school. It happens in the morning. It doesn't happen when there is the seduction. It happens in the day before the seduction. That's when you have to learn to use the shield. And that's what I think Jesus did. While Jesus' hunger was ramping up, he used the shield of faith to reinforce his trust in the Father's commitments. All day long we get pummeled by unmet needs. You do get pummeled by unmet needs. If you see somebody who has a better computer, better car, better house, at some level you are reacting to, why don't people accept my influence? Why can't I get the raise? Why can't I get the house? Why can't I get the kids? Why can't I get the family? And you know what those things are like? Bang, bam, them. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to create anxiety, shame, and fear. And some of us feel like we get hit with this stuff. And you know what he says? How about using your shield? How about that? Use your shield. What does that look like? There was a guy, a friend of mine a long time ago, good guy. One of the guys slugging it out, trying to figure out how to walk with God. And tough business, ups and downs. And so he ended up getting pulled into an affair. And he would go to the work, and this guy's a good guy. Looked for a no and didn't find it. And looked for a no for years. Just couldn't get one. Tried to read a bunch of stuff, went to a bunch of prayer things, and just could never get a no. And so we talked, and when I indicated to him, sex isn't really a problem. It's a solution. The anxiety is the problem. The sense that you're alone. So I wonder, when do you get anxious? And he goes, how's business? Oh, boy. And I asked him, do you find that there's a correlation between how things are going in business and your desire to have this affair? He said, yeah. Okay. How about if you try to figure out a different way to deal with your anxiety? What would it look like to claim commitments? In the middle of a workday, when sales are plummeting, to say, you know what, God, I have this and I don't like this. And I don't like having unmet needs, but it doesn't mean that you will abandon or forsake me. And what this guy ended up doing, he ended up sticking his feet down into those promises and trying to drive them deep. This doesn't always happen this way. I checked in with him a little bit later. I said, what's going on? He said, I found a no. See, it wasn't really about the sword. He found the sword when he used the shield. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's about responding to your unmet needs during the day. That's what it's about. If you learn to do that, there will be a sense of understanding of His commitment to you that will provide a growing ability to say no. Now, it's not going to be perfect because you and I, we're moral follow-ups. But there'll be a greater capacity to find a no. You'll hit the brakes and there'll be something there to stop. But it begins during the day with commitments and with driving, like Pat put, driving your faith deep into them. Saying, God, I don't have what I want, but I know this. You see me, and you sympathize with me, and you deal gently with me, and you love me. You change me. You choose me. Good is ahead of me. Good is guaranteed. And you know what you do when you drive your faith down into those things? Arrows come. Look at your life, and it's like, He sees me. Boom. And they don't stick in. And then once you learn to do that, you're hit with a place. Do this. And you go, you know what? I don't need to do that. Because the reason why I used to do that is it helped me to feel regarded for a minute. But now I feel regarded without having to do that. That's transformation. Our lessons, a few things. Before we leave this battlefield, let's huddle together before we leave, because we're going to head into conflict. And let's learn a few things very briefly. Our lessons. Spiritual warfare is waged on the battlefield of inflamed mortal desires. And I use a couple words carefully. If you have a pencil, circle desires. Spiritual warfare is more about desires than demons. Again, you can go to places that can drive out demons. Demons aren't your problem. Now, do they exist? Yes. I don't think you battle by fighting and driving out demons. You know what I think you do? You protect yourself from the thoughts that occur when there's unmet needs. You put up the shield of faith and stop. That's how you deal with it. It's not about demons. It's about, and again, you say, oh, Mike, I just don't think that's the focus. You can go to places that can drive out all kinds of demons. But you're still going to have a problem with desires. So deal with the root of the problem. And it's not moral desires. I don't really think it's about a good angel on one shoulder and a bad angel on the other. I don't think it's about tell the truth, tell a lie, tell the truth, tell a lie. I don't think it's about moral desires. I think it's about mortal desires. That's what happens on this battlefield, isn't it? It wasn't a matter of turn this stone into a gun and then shoot somebody. Right? It was turn it into bread. Throw yourself down and crush somebody. No, get God to protect you. These aren't moral things. They're mortal things. Again, you say, Mike, what are you saying? I think it's how we respond to mortal needs, not moral needs. Do you know what morality ends up getting messed up? Do you know when I end up acting immorally? Well, remember the example of that guy. Anxiety creates during the day, and the moral thing was just applying a different way to try to get rid of the anxiety. And it was bad. And he wanted... Do you understand what I'm saying? It's about responding to the mortal needs. And as we learn to do that, the moral stuff will follow along by itself. You got to know what's right and wrong. You can't focus there. Spiritual warfare is won by trusting God's commitments on this battlefield, not controlling our desires. I'll tell you what. You try to control your desires, I'm only going to want what's good. I'm not going to want what's bad. And I'll tell you what. You will become one tired, angry person. And you'll be brittle and rigid or hopeless and depressed. Stop trying to control yourself and your desires. That's not the thing to focus on. Don't try to pretend that you're not hungry. Don't try to pretend that you're not lonely. Stop pretending. I don't care if a Christian person tells you, stop pretending. God knows what you feel. And you know what He wants to tell you? I am with you. And I am with you not to end your discomfort, but to enable you to endure it. That's what God will do with you. He will not end your discomfort. He will walk with you, and it will enable you to endure it today. Can you live with that? Can you live with that? I'll tell you what. There's sometimes in the middle of the discomfort that you experience Him, and I can tell you a couple, and I can't say much about them. There's something about that. I don't like discomfort. But there have been times I've been discomforted, and He's walked with me. And I felt... anyway. Worship team's going to come up. We're going to close with a song. A couple last-ditch things. Focus on believing His commitments, and you'll experience the power to keep His commandments. I'll give you one of these. Kind of not one of these. Are you learning the commitments? You say, I kind of know them. If you were going to be dispatched to Fallujah, Iraq, and I gave you body armor and a weapon, would you take time to familiarize yourself with them? And again, this is not going to be a big, long, bony finger. I am saying God's commitments are your body armor. Do you have a book? And not because, you know what I mean? Not because we wrote... It talks about the commitments. Memorize them. Sunday morning, 9 o'clock, or Wednesday night. And again, it's not so that we have a bunch of people showing up at these things. They're going great. But if you came, you'd learn about them. You say, I don't have the time. And again, it's not just come to these things. What I'm saying, ratchet up your... God's commitments aren't nice. They stop arrows. They do. Grab them. Don't be lazy with them. You know what I mean? Don't hold them like this. Oh, God's commitments. Like this. They stop bullets.
Let's stand up.
As we close, we have some 40 Days with the 10 Commitments books. If you don't have one of those, they're just a way to sink your feet deeper into the commitments. Take one. If you can, there's a suggested offering. If you don't get it, take it. Take it. Take it. Just read one a day. One a day. If some of you Sunday morning, you're saying, Mike, I can't really come Sunday morning for a Bible study or Wednesday night. If you told us that you would come if it was on another time, we'll probably break our backs to try to put another time together. We feel we're real committed to it. We feel like knowing His commitments is the how. You know what? We could talk a lot about the what God wants us to do, but if you don't talk about how, that's stupid, isn't it? And knowing His commitments is the how. God, I'm really grateful to you for what you tell us about yourself and for what it means as we slowly, gradually, progressively sink our feet down into it. We react to things, and you understand that. You came and you were in a body. You don't do the things we do, but you understand it. You sympathize with us. Would you give us a greater capacity to, when we're caught in the throes of shame, fear, anxiety, we're not going to not feel those things, but help us to identify it and respond to it. Not beat ourselves up, get angry with ourselves or others. Help us to develop a greater capacity to grab your commitments, to turn down the level of the chaos in our head so that we can make better choices in Jesus' name. Amen. Hope you're able to come back next week. We're going to talk about high impact prayers.